Good morning. I'm Peter Stanton, publisher of the Worcester Business Journal. And on behalf of our event partners at State House News, welcome to the first of a three-session series on New England's second largest city. Despite the pandemic, Worcester has well over $1 billion in development underway. It's an affordable city that features a vibrant arts, dining, and cultural scene, is home to a number of colleges, and is a leader in healthcare and is a biotech hotbed. The Worcester Renaissance that took root over several pre-pandemic years will be getting back into gear into 2021 with the opening of the city's new urban ballpark, home of the Worcester Woo Sox, plus a number of major other development projects continuing to move ahead across the city. This morning's conversation will be about how Worcester got here and what lies ahead. Thank you for joining us this morning, and special thanks to our platinum sponsors, Country Bank and Fallon Health, who have stepped up to make this series on Worcester Emerging happen. And a special thanks also goes to our supporting sponsors of these three sessions, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Bolus Lynch Certified Public Accountants and Consultants, the Greater Worcester Community Foundation, Mogul Architects, Sullivan Group Insurance and Risk Management Services, and the University of Massachusetts Medical School. Today's session is the start of a deep dive into what is behind Worcester's Renaissance, with sessions also being held on March 16th and 23rd. So if Worcester is on your radar, be sure to sign up for the next two webcasts. Before we begin the program, I'd like to ask both our platinum sponsors to share a few brief welcome remarks. And I'd like to introduce Melissa Randall, who's the Corporate Communications Manager at Fallon Health. Melissa.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for that warm welcome. Fallon Health is so proud to sponsor the Worcester Emerging webcast series today. Thanks to the Worcester Business Journal and the State House News, of course, for hosting today's important conversation. You know, as Worcester's local health plan for more than 40 years, our home base is right downtown. Our 1,200 employees have enjoyed dining, shopping, and experiencing the many cultural offerings that Worcester has to offer. And we look forward to the day post-pandemic when they're able to do so again on a more regular basis. At Fallon, we truly believe in Worcester's vision and are proud to have our investments right here to help keep this vision alive and well. Our new state-of-the-art PACE Center is located on Grove Street, where we care for frail elders. You've seen us at the Fallon Health Pavilion, located at the DCU Center, where we are a sponsor. And Fallon Health is one of the original founding partners of the Worcester Red Sox. Can't wait for opening day for them. In support of our mission, making our communities healthy, we are proud to be a committed corporate citizen. We achieve this through grants, sponsorships, and community engagement initiatives, including our focus on senior issues, food security, and COVID-19 relief. The future for this city, no matter the challenges, is bright. The people who live and work here have a can and a will-do attitude and a passion for community that is simply unrivaled. And I, for one, cannot wait to see what is in store for us moving forward together. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed today's panel discussion moderated by Fallon Health Board Member Ann Tripp. Peter?
Thanks, Melissa. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Scully. Paul is the President and CEO of Country Bank.
Thanks, Peter. Well, I'd love to say that I'm down at spring training, but I really just have a backdrop behind me. But when we're topic of emerging Worcester, the ballpark seemed like the perfect backdrop for today, because when we look back a couple of years ago, it was just the rubble of an old site, and look at what has emerged there almost overnight into just a tremendous ballpark that I know we're all excited and interested, to finally have open and break the whole COVID pandemic era that we've been living in. But I think it really speaks to just what can happen when people come together with a vision. And that's what we're seeing in the city all the time these days. And the activity that's taking place there, Country Bank is excited to be part of it. You know, we obviously love the fact that we're on top of the Worcester Wall, and we'll be part of the Fan Center and have some great programs going with the Sox. But more importantly, to be part of what's happening in the city. So we're excited today and pleased to be here. Anytime you put Roberta, Tim, Ed, and Bo on a panel, you know we're going to hear some exciting things. And today's just the start of 3 series. So I'm going to let them take over from here. Look forward to seeing everybody at the ballpark, and we have about a month and a half to go before opening day.
Sounds good, Paul. Thanks very much. So before I hand things over to our moderator, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Number one, this event is being recorded and will be shared with all registered attendees post-event. Number two, if you want to ask a question, simply type it into the Q&A box, which is located on your screen, and our moderator will try to get to as many of those questions as possible during the discussion. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, who is Ann Tripp. Ann is the Executive Vice President, Chief Investment Officer, and Treasurer of the Hanover Insurance Group, and the President of the firm's Opus Management arm. Among her many responsibilities, Ann played a key role in leading Hanover's real estate investments in downtown Worcester, where the removal of an antiquated downtown shopping mall, the opening up of key streets, and the construction of a new office building over a decade ago has served as a catalyst for much of the development we see happening in Worcester today. Ann's full bio, along with all the panelists' bios, can be found in the digital program guide. And a link was sent to you in your Zoom reminder email if you want to look that up. But we'll also include that in the post-event recap. So Ann, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that introduction and for inviting me to be the moderator of this panel today and this important discussion that we're going to have. Before we start, I'd like to introduce the members of the panel, starting with Ed Augustus, who's the City Manager of City of Worcester. Ed's been with Worcester City. He's been the Worcester City Manager since 2014. He's helped lead a downtown resurgence, creating a 20-year, $90 million urban revitalization plan that's helped spur development. He's overseen $50 million in improvements in the city's 61 public parks. And on his watch, Worcester has received the highest bond rating in its history. Roberta Bryan. Roberta is the Vice President of Projects for the Worcester Business Development Corporation, where her focus is on real estate and project management. Before joining the WBDC in 2004, Roberta was a project manager for the state's division of Capital Asset Management's Office of Real Estate. Bo Mankitti. Bo is the founder and CEO of the Mankitti Group, a real estate company with headquarters in Washington, D.C., dedicated to transforming lives, careers, and communities through real estate. The Mankitti Group has become a high-profile name in Worcester development, with a number of properties and projects throughout the city, including the Chatham Lofts and the Shacks building. And Tim Murray. Tim is the president and CEO of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. Prior to the chamber, Tim served as a city councilor and three-time mayor of Worcester, and as lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts alongside Governor Deval Patrick. What a great group to have this conversation today. I think we'll kick it off with Ed. And Ed, you know, over the last several years, we've seen Worcester's been able to attract an impressive amount of outside development interest. It's really turned into strong momentum for the city. So in terms of developers and businesses and residents that might want to come to Worcester, why Worcester and why now?
Well, thanks, Ann, and I want to thank the Worcester Business Journal and the State House News and all my fellow panelists for being here and the sponsors for helping us reach out to the audience today and talk a little bit about the great things going on in Worcester. I'd say there are a couple things that I think have created the atmosphere for Worcester to really kind of come into its own, if you will, over the last few years. One is we're the second largest city in New England. We're acting like it. We are carrying a sense of confidence about who we are, what we are, the kind of talent that we have here in the community, the great institutions that are the backbone of this community, whether it be 9 colleges and universities, 36,000 college students, our medical institutions that are some of our biggest employers, our diverse kind of workforce and employers here in the city. We've also been making some very strategic investments over the last number of years to kind of unlock Worcester's potential, one of which was talked about in the introduction of you and Tim Murray and others were really critical in the whole City Square project. We had an old mall in the downtown. That mall was almost like a Berlin Wall that kind of separated part of the downtown from our Union Station, Washington Square area. It was also a psychological barrier in the city. It represented kind of a failed experiment of the 1970s in urban renewal. And by bringing that down and creating development parcels, almost all of which have been reactivated to, housing and hotels and restaurants and offices, have really brought back some vibrancy in the core downtown area. And we've been able to kind of build off of that. I would say the other kind of key ingredient is working together. We have something called the EDCC, which is the Economic Development Coordinating Council, which is made up of, for the City of Worcester, the Chamber of Commerce, the Worcester Business Development Corporation, and MBI, the Mass Biotech Initiative. Every week we meet in my office, we bird dog important projects and priorities of the city. We make sure we speak with one coordinated voice when we talk to state or federal governments, to developers. That isn't always the way things were done in Worcester. Sometimes different organizations had different priorities. And I think it's very easy to kind of keep looking for other opportunities when a community doesn't seem to know what it wants and doesn't seem to be all on the same page. And I think in the last 7, 8, 9 years, we've spoken with a clear vision for what we want in Worcester, why, and really brought all of the assets of these different organizations and city government, in a coordinated way to kind of make clear to developers and to our federal and state partners exactly what we need and why we need it.
That's a great answer. And Bo, I just love for you to add on to that, because when talking to you, you describe looking at a location as a destination. So similar, why Worcester, why now? What is happening in Worcester that makes this an attractive destination from your perspective?
Well, thanks, Ann. It's great to be here with this amazing panel. So thanks for including me. When I think about, why Worcester, I get asked this question a lot of times by people from outside of Worcester and from around the country is why Worcester, why now, and why are you making this commitment to Worcester? And I think about 5 things. The first is strong fundamentals. You heard from the city manager a lot of those things in terms of the strength of the demographics and the city overall. So there's some strong fundamentals. Second, there's committed leadership. You just heard it. You're going to see it on this panel. There's committed both municipal and civic leadership around where the city's going, and people have a shared vision and everyone's working together towards that. The third is there's anchor institutions. There's some phenomenal institutions, some of which are supporting this panel. You've got colleges, universities, you've got these great institutions that provide great building blocks for a foundation of a community. The next is you have vibrant culture. You've got an emerging creative class. You've got a tremendous sort of activity and vibrancy happening. You've got great sports activities happening with the Blue Sox and the Railers. So you got this sense that there's going to be the potential for a great lived experience and a great quality of life in downtown Worcester. And then finally, the last thing that I think you always look for is that there's untapped potential that hasn't all been realized. It's still in process. The title of this panel, right? Worcester Emerging, right? And maybe it should be re-emerging versus emerging, because it's bringing back the history and the vitality of the city and the downtown that existed before. We always say that as developers, oftentimes developers think about the world as like sites, and it's almost as if they're going to paint a picture on a blank canvas, and they go in and say, like, here's the blank sheet, and let's master plan it and decide what it should be. And we've always said that, hey, our work isn't to do that. Our work is to paint within an existing fabric, to go to places where there are existing assets, where there is potential, where there is latent energy, and find a way to unlock that and bring it forward. And so in that exercise of painting within an existing fabric, I think that Worcester has a very rich fabric to paint within, and a tremendous amount of assets to be pulled forward. So for us, it's been quite a pleasure and delight. I think the energy, the attitude, the camaraderie around people in Worcester is amazing. And having grown up in the New England area, this sort of you know, the best way I can describe it is sort of, there's a gritty sense of pride that says, hey, we have something to offer. We know we have something to offer. And we got a little bit of a chip on our shoulder about it because we know we have something that other people haven't fully seen yet. And we're excited to be part of that exercise of shining a light on everything that Worcester has to offer.
You know, listening to you and Ed, I feel your energy, and I know we've had that energy when we started working in City Square, and I think it just continues to build. So it's very exciting to hear both of you speak. Tim, if I can ask you a quick question. You've worked with both residential and commercial developers in the past. How do they characterize doing Worcester and business in Worcester?
Well, I think the city manager alluded to, there's, a growing level of confidence, city on the move in terms of activity and energy and projects. Bo talked about the diverse economy and the sectors that anchor it, and some of the emerging sectors that are coming and growing as well, and were birthed out of some of the healthcare and higher ed as we speak. But there are challenges, and some of the positives. The Economic Development Coordinating Council, I think, as developers, whether they're residential or commercial, come into the city. The city manager has an interdepartmental review team where all the department heads come into the room, really go through with a developer and a developer's team the various issues to try to make sure we're anticipating things, avoiding surprises. Those are all positives. We do have a challenge, though, right now in Worcester with the dual tax rate. We've had it since the 80s. Unfortunately, given some of the politics of the city council at the moment, the rate, the gap between the commercial and residential rate has grown. So higher cost on the tax bill to a commercial owner. That notwithstanding, we still see a lot of interest and investment because of value, but at some point that becomes an obstacle. And perhaps because of that, the city has had to be aggressive in using TIFs and the HDIP program, which was something that the chamber urged the city to adopt under a home rule back several years ago and has been used in a couple of projects. So that's a challenge. The other challenge we have on the commercial side and residential side when we're talking about larger projects, whether they be new construction or conversions of property, is infrastructure, particularly challenges with National Grid and their ability to timely move projects, do them in a cost-effective way. It has been a challenge, and it's something that the chamber has tackled head on, with National Grid, working with our EDCC partners, state. But a lot of good things, but some challenges, but we're working together to try to overcome them.
Yeah, I do think having the EDCC is so important because it does help the community come together and work through some of these challenges so we can help developers find an attractive place to be. And in that vein, maybe Ed, just one more question before I move on to another topic, but what are the tools that you have available and are you committed to using them and how?
Yeah, I mean, we really consider ourselves kind of open for business, and part of that means, our inspectional services team. We have something called the internal review team, where before somebody launches a project, we get all of the different fire department, inspectional services, planning department together and really talk about what the vision of the developer is and give guidance before people spend money to make sure that we're all on the same page with expectations for a building, a project, making sure it's in compliance with code and with the zoning requirements. And I think that's really forged good kind of communications right from the get-go, and let everybody make sure that they know the direction they're moving is in sync with what the city's expectations are. We also, as Tim mentioned, use the HDIP program for housing projects. We've used TIFs fairly aggressively in order to help kind of bring down some of the costs of these projects. We know the cost of construction is the same as it is in other parts of the state, but sometimes the rents that you would get or the hotel room rates are not the same in Worcester as they are in Boston. So, we need to kind of close that gap, and those are some tools available to us. And then infrastructure, we're doing that right now with the WBDC project at the reactory. We're investing a $3 million new roadway that's opening up a number of parcels for biomanufacturing facilities that's bringing water, sewer, road and sidewalk, street lights into that area, and really allowing the WBDC to, go like gangbusters, quite frankly, in attracting developers who are really anxious in kind of, pad-ready sites because they've got short runways for a lot of these biomanufacturing entities, and we want to make sure that we're ready to take advantage of that, and having the infrastructure in place is just one more way that the city can really kind of set the stage for investment.
Roberta, you've worked with different commercial developers, et cetera, with the WBDC. What's your experience been your experience with them working with city and being able to leverage these tools that Ed just talked about?
Thanks, Ann. I would say Worcester has always been a very aggressive community to work with in terms of it responding to needs of developers and of property owners that need to make their project work. They've been always, in my experience, at the table looking for solutions. And I think Ed highlighted one where the WBDC purchased property from the Commonwealth that had very limited infrastructure and very limited frontage, and really was not able to be maximized for development. And the city did step up, noticed the need, heard the urgency from the market, and responded with public dollars to put a roadway and infrastructure in to open up almost 500,000 square feet of possible development, and the market responded. So the city's been very tactical and supportive. And, as Ed has mentioned, there is so many projects that are happening at the same time for them to be diverse in their support, but also really paper the city, focus on the neighborhoods, focus on the recreation. We're very fortunate in Worcester to have that support, because without it, as he alluded to, a lot of times the private development just doesn't work. The timeline is just too long to wait and to put in solely private dollars to make something work. So very fortunate to have this aggressive response to the market demand.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about residential in Worcester. And Bo, I just want to talk to you a bit about it, since you are in the city as a developer. What do the demographics in Worcester make it attractive to invest from your perspective? And can you talk about the demographics?
Sure. I think you start off with kind of, I'd even frame it even a little bit wider, this idea of what are the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals of Worcester is you've got the second, largest city in New England, strategically located, right, in the heart of New England, sort of 45 minutes, 50 minutes from everywhere, from Boston, Providence, Hartford. You've got this emerging market where there's been, folks on this call have helped facilitate over $2.3 billion in recently, executed and planned private and public investment. Got about 1,600 new, recently renovated or built market rate units coming to the downtown. So you've got increasing residential downtown. You've got a diverse economic base. So you've got companies in healthcare, manufacturing, education, IT, financial services, and life sciences, but really anchored with this eds and meds, right? You got a college town, right? 12 colleges in the region, 9 in Worcester. 38% of the residents over 25 years of age or older have a bachelor's degree. It's a highly educated place. And there's this opportunity with 36,000 young people coming through the colleges to start to retain some of that both human and intellectual capital in the city as it goes forward. The next thing that we always talk about is affordability. Worcester, cost of living in Worcester is 21% more affordable than in Boston. Cost of housing in Worcester, 41%
Wow.
in Boston. And as we see, tremendous affordability issues in Boston, this also speaks to a strong future for Worcester. And then you've got quality of life. You've got, 70 plus arts and cultural organizations, people committed to placemaking. You've got world-class entertainment and performing arts venues like the Hanover Theater and Palladium. You've got a thriving restaurant scene. You've got this craft brewery and beer industry scene going on. And then you've got sports. You got the Blue Sox and you got the Railers, and you got a lot of great opportunities for sort of leisure and enjoyment. And then the last thing that we always talk about in sort of the macro space is in Worcester, there's 47,000 Worcester residents that work outside the city, but there's 70,000 people that work in Worcester and live somewhere else. So a lot of places, when we look at the demographics of a place, for them to capture additional residents, there's a need to go out and create a lot of jobs. And so for Worcester, creating jobs is really a top priority. But Worcester has an ability to actually capture residents without necessarily creating more jobs, because there are people working in Worcester that are commuting oftentimes from much higher cost places to come and do business in Worcester. And so if we can have an opportunity to capture the flow of energy from the colleges and universities and the flow of energy from those job creators and corporations, there's really an opportunity to engage and turn the downtown from sort of this sort of more sterile place to an 18-hour where people are living, working, playing, and enjoying everything that Worcester has to offer. So I think for us, it's really about the last big demographic thing is that, we say Worcester is the second largest city in New England, but that's because in the history of American cities, you sort of saw population peak in right around 1970. And then it nadered in the mid 1990s. Yeah. And many cities have not come back in their population. Worcester has. And so Worcester's growth rate since the mid 1990s actually helps to drive some of its future potential. And so if you look at the macro, just population demographic issues, there's real strength in Worcester on a macro.
Do you think that the pandemic will have some positive flow of demographics into Worcester as well?
I think it's really interesting. And I think in some ways, Worcester is ideally positioned for, I think we still don't know exactly how that's going to work out. We saw a huge uptick in people sort of moving far away from their places of work. And I think we've seen that actually, even over the last couple of months, isn't that sustainable, that people actually don't want to live in the middle of a cornfield and work remotely with a job. But if the opportunity is to live someplace where 2 days a week I could commute into the office and the other 3 days a week I could live from home, work from home, and have a great quality of life, I think the proximity to places of employment that Worcester has speaks really well to it as an alternative as the nature of work evolves, that this could actually be a really strong thing for Worcester, where you see people having a home base or a shared office in Worcester and then going into something in Boston or Hartford or somewhere else, or Providence on another day of the week.
Sounds right.
Let me just jump in and just amplify what Bo just said. Just the Boston Real Estate Times just yesterday ranked Worcester #1 for the most number of Gen X apartment dwellers, 21%. So that really speaks exactly to what Bo's talking about, that young demographic, who might be priced out of the greater Boston area. Maybe they are one of the 1,500 people who take the commuter rail back and forth to Boston in non-pandemic times. Maybe they're folks who are working from home now 3 or 4 days a week, and that will be an option that's going to be available to them long term. But they've got affordability here, and they've got a quality of life here. We hear this all the time with the life sciences sector. There's tons of available space in suburban office parks, but the talent pool doesn't want to work in a suburban office park down at the dead end of a kind of industrial road. They want to be in a place they can go to a brew pub after work, or go to the theater or a ball game somewhere in walking distance with their colleagues and their co-workers. And that's one of the things that Worcester offers, the affordability as well as the quality of life that I think that younger demographic is really looking for. So
I think that's very true. I know at Hanover, we had a hard time keeping that younger generation. In the last 5 years, we've seen them not moving to Boston, but staying because it's really attractive place to live. And in that vein, Tim, I know the Chamber's done a housing study, and what insights does that given, and what's the future demand look like from your perspective?
Yeah, and I would just, the other piece I would just add to what the city manager and Bo Mankitti mentioned is, it's hard to measure, and we work with our colleges to do it, but undoubtedly we're seeing more of those college students stay after they graduate. And I think that speaks to, the experiences that people can have, the growing arts and cultural scene here, which I would argue over the last 15 years has kind of been the secret sauce, or kind of maybe the unheralded factor here. The arts and cultural community, the events, performing arts, and all of its forms have played a role in that regard. The housing study, yeah, in October 2019, the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce rolled out at our Game Changers Business Conference and Expo a detailed housing study of Worcester and the region. It was done by Smart Growth Economics. And it really captured some of the data that Bo just shared with us, but it also provided a blueprint. One of the things that we've talked about at the Economic Development Coordinating Council, listening to concerns out in the community, that as this momentum and investment takes place, we have seen rents increase somewhat as well. And we want to try to avoid what Boston's trying to play catch up in doing right now. We want to make sure that as we invest and grow, we're building housing for all of Worcester's residents and future residents. The single biggest issue we hear from our chamber member businesses, regardless of the size of the company or the sector that they're in, is access to talent. They need that workforce. Well, accordingly, we need housing for that workforce. And so, and some people have commented to me and members of our chamber board and others, surprised that the chamber is publicly out supporting affordable housing projects. And we are aggressively doing that. We need housing of all types, which is what the housing study talked about. Yes, we need high-end, quality rentals, but we also need quality affordable housing. We want to get to where we have condos downtown. And for any developer out there right now who's watching, the EDCC and team will pre-sell half those condos for you if you're willing to come. We need that pioneer investor willing to do condos in and around the downtown. But we need housing of all types as we add to the units and the number of housing starts in the city. And we're on that, and we think there's an opportunity, and we've seen it already with some conversion of some of the old courthouse by Trinity Development, conversion of some of the old Class B office buildings into housing, having that mix of affordable and workforce and high end.
A couple more residential questions before we shift to commercial. Bo, what conditions are necessary for Worcester to start seeing condos being built downtown?
Yeah, it's a great question. Worcester's an interesting place, and we've always said in our organization that what we've witnessed is that great cities are made up of great neighborhoods, and that great neighborhoods have three things. They have a mixed income housing. They have a mix of different socioeconomic strata living there, and different types of offerings. That they have thriving commercial corridors where small businesses thrive and can create jobs. And then finally have some sort of vibrant culture. And when we think about where economically downtown Worcester is, we're still a couple of clicks in value away from the cost of building being something that works economically for a condo market. If you were to develop and deliver sort of high quality condos in the downtown right now, you wouldn't be able to charge a price that would cover the cost of that. And a lot of the, especially which really the huge opportunities I see in downtown Worcester is the adaptive reuse of some amazing buildings into great living spaces. And we're trying to do that. We're doing that right now at Chatham Loss at 6 Chatham Street with the old YWCA. But that type of work is expensive to do. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of preservation of some of the existing historic pieces, which costs more than sort of moving from a pad ready site. And I think what's been started to be proven in Worcester is that you could take a pad ready site and with an efficient construction methodology actually build something that could work with a little bit of municipal support as a market rate apartment. we're not quite at a place where we can do historic adaptive reuse in a way that doesn't work without a lot of subsidy. And I think that's an important thing for people to have in their minds as they think about economic development, that the majority of these projects that you see taking place in Worcester are supported through the state, through the city, and through historic tax credits. And without those things, they would not work. They're economically infeasible. And so as we start to have more of a mix of housing in downtown Worcester, I know there's a question about affordable housing. I think there's important thought can be given now to ensuring that we preserve affordable housing. But we also need to add market rate housing, because a non-mixed housing dynamic does not create sort of the self-sustaining nature that's necessary for a healthy community. And so I think this question of when we get there is sometime soon. I think hopefully as the market continues to strengthen, and maybe we see some drop in construction cost if the economy moves. Right now, construction costs are really high. We might start to get the opportunity to deliver that, because I think that would really promote the long-term nature of downtown living. So I do think this issue of condos is important, because one, it gives the opportunity we've seen in other communities for the more affluent empty nesters who are maybe want to downsize, but don't really want to go into, maybe don't want to go into apartments. Hey, we can buy something in the city and still have that investment. It also gives an opportunity for the growing young generation to actually plant some roots by making a financial commitment to the city that keeps people there longer. So we're excited about getting there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think Tim's absolutely correct. Every time I go to a meeting, however, we hear about, I'd move downtown if there were condos. So at some point that the demand's there and we just have to get the pricing right. And I think we'll be able to fill them quite quickly when they start being built. So that would be terrific. You've touched on neighborhoods, and I look to any of you to talk about it. So where's the next hip place to live and work in Worcester? I don't know, Ed or Bo or Roberta.
What's at the reactory in?
Roberta. Where? The reactory. We're getting to that. We're going to switch.
I thought it was in the theater district, Roberta.
Well, I think one of the things we're trying to do with the Renaissance in downtown is connect some of the neighborhoods. Worcester hasn't always felt like a walkable city. And part of it was taking them all down and making those kind of connections. Yeah. We've really been trying to do that with the redevelopment of buildings and activating the first floors. So there's that active, space, whether it be a retail or folks coming and going from the first floors of buildings, taking some public spaces and turning them into dog parks and, small park like spaces to kind of create more kind of engagement when you walk from one neighborhood to the other. And I do think that we're really seeing that happen with downtown, the Shrewsbury Street and the Canal District areas, where there's a lot more connectivity. There's a lot more sense that I might live downtown, but I think nothing of walking down to the Canal District and maybe stopping at the beer garden on the way, walk down to Crompton Collective, do a little shopping soon, later this spring, maybe going to a Woo Sox game or going up to the area around there to another beer garden. I don't want to incite people to keep drinking beer, but that works too. Shrewsbury Street really is Worcester's restaurant row. There's kind of so many different culinary options, which is, again, part of our creative kind of secret sauce that's happening here in Worcester. The food scene has exploded in the last few years. I was at an event a couple of years ago with the head of the Mass Restaurant Association. He said the two hottest food spots in Massachusetts were the Seaport in Boston and Worcester. And, we're seeing that with a lot of restaurateurs from the Boston area who, quite honestly, are coming to Worcester because there's more affordability. A lot of the Metro West folks, instead of going into Boston and dealing with the traffic and the cost of parking, are thinking about Worcester as a weekend destination, whether it be to go to a theater performance at the Hanover or experience some of the new restaurants that seem to pop up all the time. So I think that is an important part of kind of, tying the neighborhoods together and making them feel more walkable and more connected.
We're just going to add one quick thing to what Mr. Gussis said, is that, I've had the opportunity a couple of times in the evening to be working up in the upper floors of our 554 Main Street building, the old Frank Carroll building, pre-pandemic when there were events at the Hanover Theater. And what you would see is thousands of people drive into the parking garage, park their car, get out, walk across the street. And then a couple hours later, when the event was over, we saw all those people walk out of the Hanover Theater, back into the garage, into their car.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And because of all the things that we've conditioned, especially in the weather, to be still a very car dominant, downtown Worcester is still a car dominant place. And as that shifts, partly through the connectivities of people being able to park their car and get out and then experience not just one place or one neighborhood, but a multitude of experiences, then that starts to fill in some of those gaps because retail, et cetera, can start to thrive in between the neighborhoods that exist. Right now, we've got a bunch of different destinations. We've got amazing things going on. If you actually put them all next to each other, would be creating a lot of momentum. But right now, they're a little bit separate from each other. And so that ability to connect them becomes really important.
And I could just jump in. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, a visit to Worcester is worth 10,000. And, I agree with what Bo said, but I also would suggest that sometimes those cars before or after a Hanover Theater event were going to other places in Worcester. And I want to credit the WBDC, and they've done a phenomenal job, Roberta and Craig Blaze and the team, working with elected officials, business leaders, and neighbors and residents, and whether it be Gateway Park or the Reactory. But they also led the renovation of the Hanover Theater 10 plus years ago. And that has been, as we talk about downtown and creating that vision that Bo just talked about, that has brought, the Hanover Theater has brought tens of thousands of people now over the last 10 years from the 495, 128 corridor into Worcester. And they go to Shrewsbury Street, as the manager talked about, to Worcester's Restaurant Row, or the sole proprietor over in Highland Street. And it's their first visit to Worcester. And they have an incredible meal. They see a great show. And they say, wow, and they go back to the family event and talk about what they did over the weekend, or they go to the water cooler at work, and that brings more people. And we've been able to capture some of that over the years, working with our restaurants and others with, credit card data and zip codes. So again, it's that arts and cultural scene, but also kind of creating those anchors that then allow people, as Bo talked about, to walk and have these experiences. And the mall coming down was a piece of that. The ballpark and the housing infill that's going to go around to that's going to add to that density. So people walking a half mile won't think, or a half mile won't think twice about it. So it's coming. And then just lastly, in on the neighborhood piece, the challenge that we've had, and we're overcoming it, has been downtown has been that car-centric, people come to work and leave for the most part. That's changing. But what has anchored the city and continues to be, and that's validated by the housing market right now, the real estate market, are its neighborhoods all across the city, and our neighborhoods of all types. We have some diverse neighborhoods, diverse housing stock, and that has really, I think, been the strength and anchor of Worcester, and will continue to be.
Yeah, I agree. Because we're going to run out of time, and I don't want to give short shift to this topic, I'm going to move to Roberta and shift gears a little and talk about the commercial market. Massachusetts is a national leader in life sciences, and that's really an underserved sector. So Worcester's been able to capitalize on some of that growth, Roberta. We've seen with the biotech park, MBI, and the number of recent developments and expansions. So what's the vision for the growth in that industry? And can you tell us a little bit about the Reactory? Because I know that's part of that.
Sure. So I think so far, all of our answers that we've used to describe Worcester as a great place to live and work also apply to the life science world as well. And I do think that Worcester has been a bit of a hidden gem already in the life science world. Strengths like UMass Medical, AbbVie, the biotechnology park, now the UMass Science Park, 60 biotech companies already in Worcester to date. It's been a strong undercurrent in the city, and one that when I think we did get a chance to explore the industry more carefully because of the Reactory, we found that pent-up demand that you referred to, and really the competitiveness that Worcester has with cities like Boston that have been in this industry for decades, longer than we have. So the vision for Worcester now in life sciences is really to just continue the growth and provide more land and more space for the growth that is occurring here already. We have almost 1 million square feet available for life science opportunities, and that's in buildings, that's in land, that's in sites that are being prepared for buildings. Like at the ballpark, the reactory itself has about 470,000 square feet. 3 of those sites are already spoken for. Other sites are under agreement and awaiting tenants and end users. And the demand is there. As Ed alluded to, speed and efficiency is really what's going to win this race. We need to prove to this market that lives in these very small timeframes of being able to get drugs to market. We need to prove that we're ready, that we have the infrastructure available, that we have the support systems, and then the jobs, that we have educated workforce ready to come to work. And I just think that this industry is going to open up and support a effort that's already being worked on and has been by schools like WPI and Worcester State that have these opportunities, these educational opportunities in math, in science, in healthcare, and all of that is driving this workforce towards wanting to work and live in Worcester. So I kind of joked, the reactory is the next great place to live and work, but it's, I think what you can notice in Worcester is that we've done a great job of creating neighborhoods that have everything you will need. You have a place to work, you have a place to live, you have entertainment. Each neighborhood has that. One of the questions, which I know we want to leave time to get for, is, is a market downtown. I think really our goal, and it's not going to be an easy one, but it's to fill in, these missing pieces in each of these neighborhoods so that we have these microcosms of the city of Worcester, right in everyone's backyard. But I would just say that we're very, very bullish about the life science market. I think Worcester can be very competitive. We have millions of dollars of grants in research already coming in. We have a very strong R&D base, and now we need places for these drugs to be manufactured. Right now, 60% of drugs are being manufactured overseas, and we are becoming very competitive to draw that manufacturing base directly to Worcester.
Do we have the capacity for the demand in pad-ready sites, or do we have to find more and create them?
We have the capacity in that we've done a great job of locating and driving development to where infrastructure already exists, where frontage already exists, or we're creating it in a very quick way with the help of the city. We will run out of that. 1 million square feet does go fast, when you're looking at especially land. We need to prepare more. We need to convince property owners that this is a worthy cause to prepare their land for this type of development. The prices are very strong, a very competitive market, whereas office buildings are taking, a different turn right now. Life science and industrial is a very strong market. It does require more planning. The city was one of the first to permit by right life science, and it continues that tradition of allowing it in many of its zones. So we're ready, but we will soon run out of 1 million square feet.
Well, Roberta, Tim, and Ed, what's our strategy to pursue expansion in this market then? Because I think it takes all of us, right, to get there. So do we have a strategy in place? And I'm sure EDCC, this is a topic of conversation.
Yeah, I would say part of it is opening up the reactory space. That was part of the old Worcester State Hospital campus. Governor Baker had announced a few years ago an open for government initiative where he'd take surplus state land and try to make it available to local governments and developers to put on the tax rolls. And, that's providing this, I think, fairly unique opportunity, not only because of the size of the land, but because of its proximity to AbbVie, the medical school, the other bio tech facilities in that kind of Route 9 corridor in the city of Worcester. But we also have a number of other locations. MBI has recently expanded their incubator to kind of medium-sized companies, understanding that there was kind of a gap. We had a lot of startup biotech companies, but we didn't have kind of the intermediary space that they needed. And so we were losing them to other communities. They've now created that space right here in Worcester so they can grow into that intermediary space. And they're more than halfway full just a few months after they've brought that space online. And then even in the ballpark development, some of the areas as adjacent to the ballpark that's slated for redevelopment, a couple of buildings have been identified as potential lab space. Again, really recognizing where the workforce wants to be. The idea that you could be across the street from some of the new housing that's coming online, walking distance to the Canal District, to the ballpark, and to some of the kind of quality of life opportunities that that area is going to provide, as well as having a great location, new parking garage that the city's building right behind what is going to be a lab building right in the thick of the ballpark district.
And I think, Ann, it's, going back, trying to get many of those decision makers in the life sciences, biotech, biomanufacturing industry to come to Worcester and to see what's going on here. We recently had Ken Turner, the new head of the Mass Life Sciences Center, out for a tour. It's working with organizations in the leadership, past and present, Mass Bio. It's working with the commercial real estate brokers that are, in this space, again, trying to bring them, their clients, to make sure that Worcester's on the radar screen, to come out for a visit, because, there's an incredible strength here. UMass Medical School, the UMass Science Park, that kind of ecosystem from top to bottom is here. We've got, internationally well-known companies like AbbVie, Mustang Bio, others that are growing. And then we've got, as the city manager talked about, Mass Biomedical Initiatives incubating these companies, and they feed off each other. So that ecosystem is strong. I think UMass Medical School is one of the top recipients of NIH funding. So a lot of that is here, and it's making sure that people who are making decisions on where to grow and expand in Boston, in Cambridge, understand that Worcester is more than a viable option.
Right. How do we leverage the colleges in terms of this, in terms of offering internships to the students, offering potential jobs? How do we talk to the potential life science companies that might come and tell them about that accessibility?
So I think we've already seen a very interested, and positive reception from the college presidents around this. Wuxi, which is our first tenant in the reactory park, did a great job of reaching out, having breakfast with all of the college presidents to say, we have these job opportunities and all of these skill levels, and we have internship opportunities. And I think the colleges now can use these coming companies to say, look, there are opportunities available. You don't have to move to Boston. You don't have to move out of state. So it's a very positive synergy between company and colleges to get well-trained students in to their facility as either interns or starting positions, and then move through. So very positive response.
And I just jump in and say, the Wuxi is a great example. I call them a Goldilocks employer, in that there's jobs for entry-level high school diploma, maybe some associate's degree, about a third bachelor level, and a third master's and beyond. So there really is something for everyone. And in addition to the great colleges and universities we have here, we also have one of the best technical high schools in the United States. A few years ago, President Obama does one high school visit, graduation speech a year, and he came to Worcester and gave it at Worcester Technical High School. Blue ribbon winner, the U.S. Department of Education, secondary vocational school principal of the year for the United States. That is an engine of young, talented folks who sometimes are going on to higher ed and sometimes go right into the workforce, but they do so with a set of skills and practical experiences that I really think is a differentiator. And just curiously enough, they're almost in a butter to the biotech park. So it is part of that kind of footprint in that biotech area.
So a question from one of our listeners, they were saying, what other industries do we expect to see growth? And out of the pandemic, would we see e-commerce warehouse space, increased demand for manufacturing? Any thoughts from any of you on that?
Well, Roberta alluded to it earlier, some of the demand on the commercial industrial side. The same argument that was made when we were pitching the city manager and team, working with the city manager and team, pitching the Red Sox to come to Worcester is a conversation we have on a regular basis. Worcester is centrally located in New England. The highway network, the rail network, both from a freight and commuter rail perspective, are incredibly important. And we have a manufacturing base, a sector that's sometimes overlooked, but still very strong here in central Massachusetts, and important for a gateway city like Worcester in terms of providing economic opportunity and ladders. But we think, our location, and with the airport pre-pandemic growing as well, that Worcester and central Massachusetts is really being a hub for manufacturing, logistics, distribution, and packaging for all of New England. We've got a state-of-the-art rail yard with CSX, expanded commuter rail, the airport. So all of those things, I think, lend to us continuing to grow and providing jobs and tax base expansion for not just the city, but the region.
Great.
I think there's a really cool storyline here from the work, Roberta and WBDC have been doing, and everything in the life sciences from the biomanufacturing. There's this element of Worcester Worcester rising as a new age maker. Worcester was a place where things got made, and this opportunity for Worcester to step into a forward-looking, innovative way of being a place where new sorts of things get made, different sorts of things that can help drive that economy. And I think it's exciting to see that there are these growth areas and these growth paths for the economy, which have been really, a lot of work has gone in over the years, I know, to sort of cultivate and curate that. To create that opportunity. So I think that's another piece not to be lost here, is that there's huge growth potential in some of these sectors for the city, as well as great established sectors that are working.
Well, it's very exciting. You can all leave your cameras on, Tim, if you want, especially as we're coming to the end here and everyone can respond to the questions. Just if we can touch on the timeline for the ballpark, Ed, maybe. And
so we will be ready the beginning of April to have the players come to the field. Because of Major League Baseball's change in their schedule, we'll have our first day that we can actually have fans come to the ballpark will be May 11th. Will be opening day, but players will be playing as of the mid part of April. Here's just a little sense of if you look in that upper left-hand corner, that's what we had before, which was an old parking lot that supported a factory that was across the street, the Wyman Gordon. You could see in the panel on the upper right, the transformation that began. You can see, the two below, what an amazing facility that location has been transformed into. It's probably one of the most urban ballparks in the United States in terms of how it's weaved in and connected to the Canal District area. There's 4 different streets that literally are 1 block down to Green Street, which is the Canal District, which organically has got a really kind of thriving kind of arts, culture, food, retail scene going on. And you sit in any of those seats in Polar Park, and you get vantage points across the city and the city's landscape that I think are just unique in AAA baseball. So, we're all excited for opening day, and we're excited as the season progresses to be able to get more and more people as vaccines continue to roll out and capacity levels, grow for these large venues.
yeah, I can hardly wait till opening day, and it's very exciting. I have to say that as being part of this back Tim and Ed with you way back when, and WBDC and everyone back in '09 when we got involved in the downtown. And it was a lot of hard work, but it is just thrilling to see where it is today and where it's going. And I thank all of you for being part of that and moving it forward. And Bo coming up from DC and being part of the Worcester community, we really appreciate that. And I think we are done with questions. Is there anything that anyone would like to add before Peter? I think you'll give some closing comments about the next panel discussion.
And I'll just add one thing, Bloomberg ranked Worcester amongst the 10 cities in the United States best positioned to rebound from the pandemic. And I think if you look at the housing market, you look at some of the projects that have continued and haven't missed a beat despite the pandemic, I think we're showing that that's true. And we've been hit like every other community, but I think because the fundamentals were strong, because of the coordination and the teamwork that we've talked about today, I think you're going to see us not miss a beat in this kind of post-pandemic period.
Right. Peter, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, I mean, what a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much, Ann, for doing a terrific job hosting it. And Tim and Bo and Roberta and Ed, just, I know this comes naturally for you, but it really was illuminating and much appreciated. So special thanks to you guys, certainly our sponsors, Country Bank and Fallon Health, and all of those supporting sponsors who helped make it happen. And special thanks to our event partners, State House News, especially Russell Permagant and George Donnelly, who were, key in pushing us to do this series on Worcester. So Ann, you mentioned the next couple sessions. The next one is next Tuesday, and we're going to focus on what Bo talked about, and Tim did too, that kind of magic of the civic and cultural life. And we'll dig into development on that side and the progress the city has made. And then the third session is going to be really all private developers, sort of, they're not all Bowman Keaties, but folks who are doing major projects in the city right now and really talking about how they see the future. So this has been a great start to the series, and thank you all so much for participating.